Hello, this is Geeske, and this is the second fabric printing tutorial. Screen printing first appeared in China during the Song dynasty around 900. It was then adapted by other Asian countries like Japan. However, it was not until silk mesh was more available for trade in the 19th century that screen printing began to pick up popularity. Andy Warhol used screen printing as an artistic technique, using large screens to print his famous Marilyn Monroe portraits and this large portrait of American icon James Dean. There, of course, are many things you can do with this technique, but in this tutorial I want to show you how you can screen print on fabric using stencils and an unexposed screen. And these are the materials that you need. You need some paper tape, scissors, a permanent marker, a sketchbook or some sketching paper, a squeegee, a knife, a small brush, screen printing ink. I have some clutches for my large screen, and you need some plastic sheets. I used a cutting mat, and I have a clean screen, though it's a bit busted. And this is the textile I got. These clutches I've had for years, and I use them to keep my screen in place. One end goes to the edge of my screen, and the other end I attach to the table. Your screen is smaller, so you can keep it in place with your hands. I find that difficult with this one because it's so big. These clutches are not expensive. You can buy them at any online store where they sell screen printing stuff. To get started, I take my knife and my permanent marker. This is just a simple Staedtler pen that I got at the post office. I've got my sketchbook, and I've got my transparencies. I made this simple sketch of a pair of lips and I'm going to trace it onto my sheet. This marker doesn't smudge, that's why I use it. Then I'm going to cut away the inside of the lips with the knife. Remember that any details you drew inside the shape of the lips, or whatever shape you are drawing, are going to go away, unless you have them connect with your leftover shape. If you decide you want some details inside the shape that you cut out, you can use the tape or a masking fluid to do so, but more about that later. When you start printing, make sure your garment or fabric is ironed and smooth. Put some paper inside, just in case the ink goes through. I'm placing my cutouts on the bag to make a nice composition. I tried to get a little Picasso vibe going with all the noses and such. What I noticed is that simple shapes work best with this technique. Not cutting away super mini parts have given me the best results. Then I put some rolls of tape on the pieces of plastic so I can press my screen down and the stencils will stick to my screen. This way I keep my composition in place. Then I turn my screen around and I'm taping up the whole thing. I remove the little rolls that I used because they're lumpy, and I don't want that. Remember that ink is going through every part you didn't tape up, so really take your time in doing that. So I set up my screen, carefully placing it over my tote bag in the right place. I put a line of ink over the area I want to print, not taking too little ink, because whatever's left over we can scoop back. I take my clean and dry squeegee and I drag it over the area I want to print, holding the squeegee with 2 hands and putting quite some pressure on it. If you are printing by yourself and you have no clutches, hold the screen with 1 hand and print with the other. You can drag your squeegee once or twice, just don't move your screen in between runs. When you're done and you're not printing another shirt straight after, wash your screen. Wash it with water and a soft sponge, or it becomes unusable. The stencils you made, by the way, can also be washed and reused. Here's a setup for a tiny print I wanted to do at the back of my bag. I put my bag in the right place and I taped up my screen. I put down a line of ink again and then I dragged my squeegee. As you can see, this one was a little tight with my taping. So don't be a lazy taper or you'll regret it. And I'm going to keep reminding you to wash your screen. Don't ever let your ink dry in your screen, that's really important. Now, just like with the stamps, this print also has to be heat set. I made a little setup with a tea towel and some baking paper again. I put the iron in a cotton setting because using the hottest setting might burn your fabric. I just move over it for a minute or two, making sure that this print will survive many, many laundry days. I wanted to show you a second print that I made on a t-shirt. This is my design. I'm keeping it upside down right now. I'm placing the transparent sheet on my drawing again, and I'm using the permanent marker to trace it. This is actually a gift for a friend. She owns a sausage dog named Sjors, so I wanted to make a varsity-like pocket print with the letter S. Also, Sjors is friends with my dog, though he always humps her, so he might want more than just friendship. Now I'm going to cut out the design, and I'm aware that some elements here will disappear, but I will fix that later. I just drew them as a reference for myself. I cut out lines of paper tape so I can stick these onto my screen, giving short paws and an eye. Again, I ironed my garment before I started my printing, but you know this setup by now. Then I decide where I want my sausage dog to go. I use some paper tape to make a square on my t-shirt. This is just a little guide for myself because I don't want my print to be diagonal or completely in the wrong place. I set up my screen, and as you can see, I needed less tape this time because there was a little bit of extra plastic around my cutout. I put down some ink, and I check if my squeegee is clean and dry, and then I go for it. Here's how it turned out using the cutouts of the tape in my stencil. Now I want to tell you about these two. You use the drawing ink on the right to draw your design on the screen, and then you use the screen block on the left to cover up the rest of the mesh. These are not included in your package, but it's a cheap and very effective way to transfer more detailed designs onto your screen. So I removed the details I printed earlier using the tiny parts of tape. I just used a little brush and I filled them in. I'm going to use the drawing fluid to print a second layer. I place a piece of plastic on the doggy, and I use my marker again to draw some details onto my design. I used a water-based pen to trace my drawing onto my screen. This one will wash right out when I clean it. Then I take my tiniest brush and I trace the lines that I drew with the drawing fluid. I don't know what this stuff is exactly, but it's fatty, gooey, and sticky at the same time. After I'm done tracing my lines, I let the fluid dry for 10 minutes, and then I use a dry and clean squeegee to drag the screen block over the mesh. I was a bit messy, but it will work when I use some tape to cover up these rough edges. I let this dry as well, and after that I wash out the drawing fluid. Don't use a sponge to wash it, because then your screen block will come out as well. You can use the screen block to further refine your image if necessary. Now for the placement of my second layer, I use a plastic sheet. I stick it to the table and also to my shirt. I'm going to print on the sheet just once. Then I can put my shirt in the right place and I flick back the sheet. It's a perfect trick, it works every time. Here you can see my lines. I'm just going to put my shirt in place and then flip the sheet. Then I put down my screen again and I print for real. And ta-da! Here's the sausage dog. I think it came out perfectly. I'm going to bore you with some more heat setting, but it's really important if you're printing on fabric. So I had fun doing this, and now I have 2 items to give to friends. I hope you liked it. See you next time!